Deonandan. He's the University of Ottawa epidemiologist. Doctor, thank you for joining us this afternoon. When you look at the numbers, certainly from Manitoba, from Winnipeg, and then you see what is coming out of Ontario and Quebec, context is everything, isn't it? All right, we'll check on Raywat Deonandan with us here on 680 CJOB from his perch in Ottawa. Julie, certainly what we are seeing today, and a lot of questions being asked of Dr. Brent Roussin, who, by the way, will join us here live after the 4:30 news tomorrow. All right, we have Raywat here, Roussin tomorrow after the 4:30 news. Raywat, context important. When we look at Winnipeg compared to Ontario, Quebec, talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, well, they're different provinces and they're different epidemics, different population dynamics, right? So Ontario, we have a couple of very large urban centers, a lot of international travel. We have a lot more diverse populations. We have clusters of incredible crowdiness. So it's a little more dangerous in Ontario. So I'm not surprised to see that we're having a rougher time than you are in Manitoba, but you are definitely experiencing what looks like a second wave of this disease. So no one is totally safe, but you definitely have a better experience right now than us.
And we heard our top doctors say, you know, once that test positivity rate hits 3%, they start to get a little nervous. And I know in the city of Winnipeg on Friday, it was around 3.1%. So really no surprise that they decided to move us into code orange. 28 days, is that enough? If people follow the rules of the smaller group sizes and masking up, will that give us enough time to tamp this back down?
Yeah, well, 28 days, that's based on our measurements of the average symptom duration, you know, how long it takes to symptoms to develop and then to diminish again. So it should be enough, but it's an average. Some people are going to be to have different responses. We'll see. 3.1%, I mean, that's higher than it needs to be, right? We aim for 1% or less. So it tells us that the penetration of the disease in the community is more than we are detecting at the moment. And you've got, 600 active cases or so. Multiply that by 20 or 50 for the actual number of people walking around with the disease. So keep that in mind. You have more active cases than you know about right now.
You've been watching the situation not just across Canada, but indeed around the world. And something that we're seeing in this country, and indeed here at home in Manitoba, is the higher number of young people who are now testing positive. Are you seeing any good messaging across Canada or anywhere else in the world that is really getting through to the younger demographic to say, hey, you need to do your part? Because I don't think at this point they're hearing the messages from the typical talking heads, if you will.
That is a great question, and the answer is no. We don't know what to do about that. We've had many conversations, the so-called experts, about how best to deploy the messaging. It's also good to keep in mind that it's not just bad behavior. It's people who aren't able to distance. A lot of young people live in group settings, for example. They can't stay away from their roommates, and they can't go home, or if they do, they infect their parents, whatever it might be. So we have to have some compassion as well for living conditions that aren't amenable to the best public health practices. But yes, we're definitely concerned about this growth in young people because it will ultimately bleed over into the older population who will probably be hospitalized because of it.
Ford's saying today that this could be worse than the spring, early summer wave. Is he just being provocative there, or in the data that you see that there really is a warning here the second wave could be a whole lot worse?
It could be a whole lot worse. That's what we saw in Australia. So we're looking at places like Australia and Spain as our warning signs. Spain is in crisis mode right now. Their ICU beds are filled and they're delaying elective surgeries as a result. Australia's second wave was far worse than their first wave, and they saw a lot more deaths as a result. So we could see that. It doesn't have to be that way, though, right? And it may stay most.
All right, Raywat Deonandan just popping out there. We've had just a bit of a problem, Julie, with his signal, but just to finish that thought with Spain and certainly what we've seen in Australia is the relaxation and people essentially going back to old behaviors versus what we've so far seen in a country like Italy, where they've certainly paid attention to all the warnings and what that country has gone through, and they're embracing different ways. So maybe experience is the one thing. And I think, Julie, one of the things that we're recognizing here is that while I think most people are masking up, I saw that during the day today, the proof will be in those next couple of weeks to see whether or not those numbers will go down. So, Raywat, just a quick thought from you, then Julie has another question. We're going to introduce that app later this week. How important is that app?
It can be important. It really isn't that important anymore because it's not the game changer we hoped. People aren't using it as much as we'd hoped. But it will help. It will help enormously. We have many cases here in Ottawa that were detected because of the app. People forget where they've been. It's particularly important for young people, again, who have a lot more social contacts, who forget where they've been. You don't know if you're sat next to a case on a bus, for example, right? So this app will let you know if that's the case. So please download it. Please use it. It's safe and it's effortless.
And I think is the message that what we really need to get through to people is if you don't wear the mask, if you don't get the app, if you don't follow these rules now, we could be facing another complete shutdown. Could it get that serious?
It could get that serious. Frankly, I don't think that it will, because I think we know more now about how to do targeted lockdowns, to target certain sectors and certain geographies, not have to do the entire provincial shut down. But that is definitely the risk. Why do we want to risk that horrible outcome? It's a simple thing to wear a mask. It's a simple thing to use an app. It's a simple thing to not go to that house party. So for the betterment of society, to keep our lives up and running, please, let's just do these simple things.
What do you say to people who say, masks don't work? Do the numbers just prove them wrong?
My call keeps dropping.
All right, we're having one of those days. Raywat Deonandan and Julie Buckingham with us here on 680 CJOB. Raywat, thank you so very much. Sometimes we're slave to the technology. We will speak again, I'm sure.
No
Coming
doubt.
up in